The Wisp, Chapter 20. There was no conversation in the car. Bara tried several times to talk it out, but her father said nothing. She quickly realized there was no point in trying to explain. What could she say anyway? Dad, your wife's a witch? It wasn't like he was going to believe her. So instead she turned her head to the window and waited out the ride home. Mr. Kavanagh wasn't purposely trying to make Bara suffer. He was just too furious. It wouldn't serve to simply yell. He had to make her understand. It was too soon. She wasn't ready to date. Never mind. He didn't finish the thought. For the first time in a long time, he actually missed his ex-wife. Despite her problem, he had to admit Beth knew Bara better. They had a better relationship. It hadn't been the same since he'd left the house. He doubted things would ever be the same again. The car pulled up to the house. Courtney waited at the open door. Bara got out of the passenger side and Courtney rushed at her. Bara thought Courtney might actually attack, but Courtney stopped suddenly and regained control. "Is she okay?" she asked. "She's fine." They all made their way back into the house and stood in the foyer. Mr. Kavanagh told Bara to go to her room. He needed time to think. Bara did as she was told, but stole one last glance at Courtney before going up the stairs. She swore there was nothing short of satisfaction on her stepmother's face. Bara returned to her pink catastrophe of a room, took off her coat and threw it on a chair. It occurred to her that the carelessly discarded coat was out of place in the spotless room. The pink palace had been tidied. She'd half expected to find it ransacked. Or maybe it had been, and then Courtney had tidied up afterwards. It hardly mattered. Courtney wouldn't have found what she was looking for. The diary. There were footsteps outside the door. Next came a knock. Bara told the knocker to come in and then, working at some avoidance, grabbed her coat and went into the closet. When she came back out, her father took a seat on the bed and motioned for her to join him. Dreading what was to come, she crossed the room and sat. "I'm worried about you, Bara, Evelyn." Evelyn, her middle name, her grandmother's name. He only used it when she'd really put him at his wit's end. "I'm okay, Daddy." It was a shameless ploy calling him Daddy, Bara knew, but it was worth a try. Her father didn't soften, not at all. "I have liked to have talked this matter over with your mother, but as she seems to be out of reach of any communication—" He paused and took a deep breath. "Well, in the absence of your mother, I've talked it over with Courtney, and we—" "You talked it over with her? How could you?" "I needed another opinion." "What do you really know about Courtney?" Bara countered. "You married so quickly. You and Mom hadn't even been divorced a year. For all you know, Courtney could be a murderer or something." "A murderer?" Mr. Kavanagh mocked. "Really, Bara? That's what you're going with? Courtney didn't sneak out of this house and worry everyone. You did. I didn't find her in a strange boy's room doing God knows what. Colin's not strange. I've known him since I was 5. All boys are strange at this age. They all want the same thing. Colin's my friend. He'd never try anything on me." Her naivete was too much, and after finding her in Colin's room and on his bed, she couldn't be that dense. Mr. Kavanagh couldn't contain himself any longer. He lost it. He came to his feet and hollered. "Oh, yes, he would. I was a boy once. Believe me, I know." Anger is contagious, and Bara lost it too. "Colin isn't anything like you," she fired back, and then they ceased to fight about Colin. "He's loyal. He'd never leave his family. Never. Not like you." Bara had finally said it, what she'd been thinking all these months. But looking at her father, she wished now she hadn't. His pain was clear. Mr. Kavanagh took a deep breath to regain control. "Be that as it may, my shortcomings are not the issue here. Your behavior is. You're grounded. There's no question about that. And I don't want you seeing Colin, not until I've had a chance to talk this over with your mother." Bara tried to backtrack. "Dad, I'm sorry." "I know you are." At a loss, Mr. Kavanagh left the room. Bara lay in bed until the clock by the bedside said it was 4:30 a.m. Her father would be in bed, most likely Courtney with him. It was becoming obvious there would be no sleep for her, not until she talked this out with someone. Unfortunately, her phone was still in her other coat, downstairs. Treading through the dark house would likely wake someone. After her last escape act, her father had armed the security motion sensors in the entryway. There was also a landline down the hall, but then getting caught talking to Colin would only rev things up again. If she did get discovered, Mr. Kavanagh would go a lot easier if it were Amy, a nice, safe, female friend. The decision made, Bara got out of bed and crept down the hall. Conscious of every creak of the floorboards, she hoped she was the only one. The phone was on the table across from the guest room. She picked up the receiver. To her mind, the click sounded as loud as a thunderbolt. She listened. The house remained silent. She dialed and prayed Amy and not someone else, especially Mr. Frank, answered. There was only one ring. A familiar alto sounded on the other line. Mr. Kavanaugh and Courtney's room wasn't 10 meters away. Talking in the hall wasn't the best idea. Hoping to muffle the conversation, Bara took the phone into the guest room. Amy, she whispered, I know it's late. I'm sorry if I got you into trouble. It's okay. I knew you'd be calling. They continued to speak in hushed tones. Amy, Bara paused, not sure of her reaction. I know, my stepmother is Sedgwick's witch. She's Guinevere. Predictably, Amy reacted with disbelief, but then she took a moment to think. How can you be sure? Bara went over the events of the night. If it had only been Bara having these weird dreams, Amy would have clung to her doubt. But if Colin was having the dreams too, something was definitely going on. Besides, Amy'd had her own weird experience of late. They couldn't all be crazy. And so Amy listened, and then agreed. It seemed in all likelihood the Wisp really existed. The diary was a telling of real events, and yes, Courtney was Sedgwick's witch. Too much had happened for her to continue to doubt. Does Courtney know you know? Amy asked. I don't think so. She'd have tried to do something to me, wouldn't she? All she's done is try to get the diary. Try not to be alone with her. Can you lock your door? There's no lock, but I can push a chair in front of it. There was a silence on the other end. Amy? Still no response. Amy! A moment passed, and then Amy spoke in a whisper. He's awake. He meant Mr. Frank. I should go. Wait, you knew I'd be calling. How did you know? I had a dream. The Wisp told me. What? First me, then Colin, and now you? It wasn't like your dream or even Colin's. I'm not even sure it was a dream. I wasn't in the woods. I was in my room, and she came in. It was really weird. I couldn't move or speak or anything. She stood over my bed and whispered I should wake up, that you'd be calling. When I opened my eyes, she was gone. I snuck out to the hall, and a few minutes later, you called. She must be watching me. And you. That's good, isn't it? If she's watching, she might be able to protect you from your stepmother. Do you think she can do that? I don't know. I have to go. He's in the kitchen. I'll call you tomorrow. Be careful. Click. Bara crept out of the guest room and hung up the phone. She listened to the house for any sign that someone had overheard the conversation. Everything was still. She retreated down the hall and into the Pink Palace. Keeping her promise, she pushed a chair in front of the door. It was hard work. The chair was heavy, and Bara was trying not to make any noise. But if she found the chair heavy, so would her stepmother. Mission accomplished, she settled on the window seat and looked down at the lawn statues. An army of silent watchers. Odd under the circumstances with a real-life witch just down the hall, but Bara felt somehow safe. It made her feel better to think the Wisp might be watching too. At the thought, she got up and crossed to the bed. It was comfy, even if it was pink. Something told her Courtney was sleeping and wouldn't bother her until morning. The witch was sleeping, and so should she. Dreams were calling. Bara hoped they'd be of the normal kind. Better yet, she hoped she wouldn't dream at all. There was no rest with the dreams. They only tired her all the more. She closed her eyes, her mind finally quieted, and she drifted off. Blessed day, her sleep was a restful one. At first.
The Wisp is published on Amazon.com. Also available on Amazon is Monsters, Real and Imagined, Tragic, Frightening, and Funny, All Too Brief, a collection of short stories and poetry. Strays, a collection of short stories and philosophical love poems, and Tattoo, Calling All Soldiers Home, a collection of poems in brevity.